as you reflect on kind of the success within your own organization here, what do you think is a key aspect that makes the performance reviews go faster, better, more impactful?
Um, I think that having it be efficient ultimately makes it more impactful because it improves the quality of feedback and the completion rate. And ultimately, to make it impactful, I think it really does need to be regular and timely and tied directly to the job, whether that is including goals. Whether that is the multi-rater feedback or, getting input from the folks who are most relevant. Um, and kind of implied in all of this is the fact that especially for larger organizations, you may need to have a differentiated process with different templates and different steps for different groups of employees. But again, having the technology solution is what really, really empowers that and supports all of these things.
That's really, really true. I mean, Simone, go to the next slide. Let's see if we already want to, because we're already in a way talking about this part here already, that being able to do the template in a way that makes the most sense, that you have what's going to be in the content. Amy, you talked about including goals, including skills, including job profile. You can also include things like training. You can also include things like organization values here. And I know that from your practitioner perspective, immediately a question comes to you saying, hey, what should be the weightage of different things here, right? But sure, that question still needs to be discussed. But the fact that you can do all these things already gives you a significant leg up in being able to do this, right?
Yes, completely agree. And if some of you are listening to this and thinking like, wow, there's a lot of bells and whistles here, and we're not doing some of these things. Start small, first of all. If you're not doing anything right now, don't put in place all of these things the first go around. I think you need to have a change management plan that's incremental, right? So, if you're not really using a specific scale, then put that in place before you get to weighting. And kind of crawl before you walk, before you run. But there's obviously a lot here that you can do ultimately to really turn the performance reviews into a powerful business process. But don't be intimidated if you're kind of at the beginning of that maturity curve.
Yeah, I think Amy, you said well that somebody who's going to be who who may be intimidated by it, don't be intimidated by it. Start where you are, add something here to what you can here, right? So Amy, when you see normally goals versus skills and that debate happen within your organization, because again, we often answer this thing that, hey, if ClayHR provides you the tools, but whether you're going to include our goals in your performance review or not depends upon sort of your own organization's maturity. It's not for ClayHR team to decide, even though the ClayHR customer success manager working with the customers is always able to provide that guidance there. But the end decision still, results in decision makers such as yourself, right?
Yes, and asterisk here. If you're at the beginning of designing what you want your performance review process to look like, you have to involve the business and get input from them as well. They will certainly have feelings. I've sometimes spent an hour and a half debating a 5-point scale versus a 4-point scale and been surprised by how strongly people feel. So in my current organization, we're very goals based in how we approach performance management. I'm new to my role, and one thing I've heard, and I think this is relevant for, potentially a lot of different organizations, having a performance management process that exclusively relies upon goal setting and goal achievement may not actually make sense for all positions, depending on the nature and kind of the outcomes that you expect from those positions. And so we're looking at kind of bifurcating and having different templates, or at least reflecting other aspects in our performance review process. So even though we have a process in place, it's important to constantly kind of measure and take feedback and adjust as you go. and be really open to that as an HR leader. I think that partially, like anything else, the process that we go through to get buy-in and to identify our champions, influences the outcome and success of this just as much as any best practice or any technology that we use.
So, so one of the things that you mentioned that the goals are some organizations are much more goals based, so you have to adapt your process to that. And this ultimately, again, the fact that some organizations might be setting goals that are very strictly approved goals, and then for you, it makes sense that you're going to have it, versus some organizations saying, yeah, sure, any individual can set any goals, and the supervisor always going to approve it, etc. But they don't really necessarily tie into organization. Then maybe you don't want to include goals, right? Because effectively, that's a choice that you're going to make here, right?
Fully, everything is a choice. I think is the best practice if you're going to have goals incorporated in a performance management process. They should tie to some type of overarching organizational goal. But here's the truth, guys. You may not have that as an organization, and that's okay. And as an HR leader, although you can certainly influence a strategic planning or goal setting process for your org, you can't do it, yourself, right? Other leaders have to be bought in. So if you don't have those goals to tie into, then you might want to consider having goals assigned on an individual basis, or you may want to consider something like reviewing based off of competencies or values or whatever it is that you do have and that you do feel confident about and that does influence the culture in your organization. So it's a this and a that. It's not just one thing. One size does not fit all, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So, and one of the, Simone, you're very, very dynamic with respect to these things. We ask you to jump slides, because based on the previous thing, we asked you to do that. Do you mind going back can you go out back into the slideshow, out of the slideshow mode here? I want you to go to the slide 16, actually. Could you do that? Because this again goes to for example, Amy was talking about, and I think also it helps us address this point. Sorry, can you go back 1 to 15? We just go up here where we were. I just want to clarify here to a lot of the audience members here, because this can preempt some of the questions, because Amy touched upon this here a little bit. Let's suppose you create your content template. This is the first tab where Simone is at, even though it does not show everything below it, which the next slide does. But in a performance review template, you're going to have your dynamic sections and your static sections. Dynamic sections mean like the four things that you are looking at, even though you're not seeing it, the trainings, etc. But the goals are assigned to what the person is assigned. So that means my goals could be different from Amy's goals. So even though we are receiving the same exact performance review template, her review would become different from mine by the virtue of her having different goals and different job profile skills compared to mine. But if you go to the next slide, slide 16, you can also have certain sections at the bottom. For example, here, this general sales one, and this seems to be more of a sales related template here. So we can see that there are going to be some skills that are again a dynamic sections of whatever skills somebody has, it'll automatically come in, versus this section here, which is the same. So if Amy and I are two sales team members, we're going to have the same exact two metrics show up here. So in a way, having a mixture of static and dynamic sections allows you to both customize it to the individual, at the same time enforce some commonality and some uniformity to that as well. And again, I'll let Amy speak to what's the best way to balance it. But from a capability point of view, we recommend that you have a mixture of both, even in different proportions.
I love that. I think the balance might be a little bit different for everybody, but I do think it's really important to have some type of commonality, some type of common rubric, even if it's just, informing part of the review process, for departments or teams, because otherwise you're not going to be able to calibrate, right? If everybody's review is just based off of their individual goals and they've made those up on an individual basis, and I mean made them up, like created them, not invented them out of, so let's assume they're appropriate. But if they're all individualized, how are you going to be able to say that this person is actually performing better than that person, right? And these things matter. Most organizations want to they're proponents of pay for performance. And when it comes down to promotions and other things that often are decided based upon outcomes from this process, you need to have some type of common yardstick to be able to calibrate. And I think that's really important, that we were able to offer that, and that we're, getting input from the relevant leaders on what those things should be.
And by the way, some people have dropped in some Q question and answers. So please continue to drop them. We're gonna, in the next 10 minutes, we're gonna start taking some of those here. Fiona, I did see your question, so we will, and I think that was more of a comment, but still, please, thank you, and keep them coming. On this just dynamic versus static sections here, just to also include the idea here that, people, Amy, you took the topic of, hey, you start a discussion about one to four versus 1 to 5, and you see the debate just suddenly explode, which suddenly makes you think, oh my God, I did not know people had such strong feelings about that. And which can sometimes make you feel like, hey, decision making can slow down, because every decision you have to really fight for to coalesce people around. And that some of the decisions we are sharing are even more. For example, should we have a section for job profile skills, or should we have skills that belong to an individual, even if they're not in my job profile? We've seen some of those discussions go on for hour and a half as well, and a topic on which sometimes, if I get stuck in that, and I have absolutely nothing to contribute there, because in ClayHR it's just a question of you choosing this toggle or that toggle. But from the customer's perspective, that's a choice they have to make based on their own, based on their own internal culture. And we're like, okay, but again, having those discussions is still worth it, because you will then come up to a rubric that works for you. And then hopefully you can then take next year or your next 6-month cycle and maybe tweak it a little bit.
100%. First of all, anything that gets business executives in the realm of HR talking for 90 minutes straight and passionately, I'll take it. So it's okay, right? Like don't be put off by that. It's good conversation, and you often uncover a lot of other things. And you're right, and render that whatever decisions you ultimately make, none of this is irreversible. I would also suggest, I've seen situations where the viewpoints are pretty evenly split, and people are pretty dug in, right? So we've already talked about you can have different templates for different groups. You can also pilot, right? You can see, within our workforce, if we do a 4-point versus a 5-point, how does that actually impact, the natural curve? And if there's strong beliefs, sometimes having actual data from your actual workforce as opposed to benchmarks, will help give people confidence in making a broader decision for the organization. And the technology certainly makes that easy to be able to do pilots and then pivot if you have to.
Got it. Got it. We have a fair bit of material to cover. Let's keep moving. But the next slide, I just want you to go, Simone, to 17. Because again, Amy, you already mentioned the topic of layers, right? Again, in ClayHR, and this is again when people are coming from something old, like either doing paper or Word, and then they find that, oh, you can just add a new layer. Yeah, you can just add a new layer. You don't have to add layer for all your performance reviews, because this is all you're looking at this template here. I believe you're looking at the sales performance review template. You can have a 3-layer performance review. There's in this one, you're looking at a self plus peer plus solid line supervisor. You could have a manager plus department head plus somebody else, or a specific person doing it. Again, whatever you have, maybe you have a sales coach who does all the performance reviews in addition to the manager, in addition to the department head. Whatever your choice is of the layers, be aware you can choose those layers. Secondly, you can don't have to choose the same layers for organization wide, right? You can say this for the sales team, we're going to do 3 layers. For management team, we have 4 layers because we also want to have their direct reportees also providing feedback. Versus maybe for frontline employees, you can just say it's just the manager is only 1 layer. Really, the choice is yours. And just I mean, Amy, the important point is people shouldn't get stuck in analysis paralysis. But other than that, choose it and go forward, and you can always tweak it next cycle.
Absolutely.
Let's keep going, Simone. I think just to address this topic of performance reviews in bulk, because this is sort of the main point of today's discussion is that, you can, whatever you're seeing here, by the way, all the slides, they're all still relevant. Just the fact that you can do things just in bulk, like, if you have to launch performance reviews for your 430 sales team members, just pick the template, choose the org unit. In this case, I think it's a little harder to see in these filters over here, but choose one of those filters there, whether it's a job profile or org unit or location. And even that's a question sometimes people have, what should we use? But let's suppose you somehow select all your sales team members, whether they're all in the same department, or that generally is one case. Then you just launch the performance review. And because your template is already dynamic, it will automatically bring in people's own goals, people's own skills, plus give them the regular sections that we have seen, sort of what we call the, Amy, I forget the term that you use, but I refer to them as the uniform sections. I think you call them something else. But again, those sections end up just launch the performance reviews, right? So when people launch it first time, the first time when they launch this in performance reviews in ClayHR, they're sort of like, oh my God, I did not realize I could just launch 700 performance reviews just like that. It used to take them like a week to just launch it. Forget completing it, forget calibrating it, forget just launching it was enough of a hassle because you had to. Here you work on your master template, just launch it with a click of a button. Once you launch it, click of the button, and you see the progress bar go like 400, 425, it is so satisfying. We're just sitting there like, oh, okay, I can sip my coffee for a minute while it does this thing. We could all do that, I think, right? We could all sip our coffee for a minute here. Amy, is that your
Or yeah,
experience?
yes, it is satisfying, and it's helpful to be able to, of course, report out on those metrics as well. Um, and after you sip your coffee, hopefully you'll say, now let me have some conversations with the managers. Let me see how things are actually going. Let me look at the feedback. Right. So all these things that you can do when the administration is streamlined and tech enabled, that ultimately will have a really positive impact on the outcome.
Exactly. And if you just go to the next couple of slides here, I mean, some of they're just like a little, for example, this one, once you have launched the performance review, then you can see them in the dashboard that Amy is, for example, just mentioning. So she knows which managers are already starting their thing, and she can come in next day and saying, oh, okay, from the 2,100 performance reviews that are launched, you know, 300 people have already completed their self-review. Other people haven't, but again, they had 7 days to do it. So you can kind of, watch the process a little bit. But it's important that, you are able to, uh, you're able to see things in bulk. You're able to see from your control panel, from your dashboard, just to see, kind of how the progress is flowing. And also, it's important to keep in mind that even though, and go to the next slide, Simon, I just want to show some visibility settings here. Here, this slide is a little bit of a detail. So I think uh, if you will indulge me a little bit, that I want to point to what it's really showing. So this is essentially showing you one, in this case, the performance review has 4 layers. But if you look to the right-hand side of this table here, you can also see exactly what is being shared with Michael here. exactly what is being shared with Michael here. For example, does Michael even know that who is doing this particular peer review? In this case, Michael doesn't even know who's doing this peer review, let alone what that person is going to say. Or yes, they're going to see what it is, but they don't know who. They don't know who did it. So if you want to establish certain controls of, transparency or anonymity, you can actually do that. And I mean, Amy, you can speak more to, again, how the organizations can benefit from it. But from a platform perspective, the fact that you can have it is helpful.
It's hugely helpful, and not something to be taken for granted because I can say from experience that not all HCM providers allow really enable this or give a lot of flexibility with it. I think personally the visibility control is most helpful in a process where you need time to calibrate. And here's what I mean by that. Let's say you have a VP with 12 directors reporting to them, and they all more or less get their team's reviews done. But ultimately, the VP's input needs to be captured before we, give out the merit budget or bonus budget or whatever it may be, whatever is going to be informed by this review process. So number one, this is just a very strong opinion that I'm going to express here. Um, if reviews need to be changed, having visibility controls allows you time to do that before they're actually shared with the employees. And number two, it allows you to just time out the conversations in a way that allows all of these things to kind of flow logically. And if you don't have those types of controls in place, things get out of sync. People end up feeling confused. Why did I get a 4 rating but only an average increase? Just you name it. So I think that this is really, really critical and something that it's a small detail that can have an outsized impact if you don't kind of pay attention to it.
I agree. I mean, there are a lot of these questions already coming up, so I want to go a little faster in the next couple of minutes, try to wrap this up. But Amy, to the point that you mentioned here, being able to edit, or even if we go to the next slide here, where I think, Simone, you're showing just the consolidation process. And by the way, again, in the slide, you will notice one interesting thing here. I'll point out to it. You might also miss that. In ClayHR, because organizations have their own terminology around things, people can use the term performance review, the underlying construct, but they can then use a totally different term. They can say, oh, that's a talent assessment. That's a
Mm.
appraisal. That's a performance review. That's a performance conversation. It's my retrospect. I've heard so many different names. So just remember that this is a setting inside ClayHR. So you don't have to choose the default name. Like you can see in this slide here, somebody has tweaked the name as per their own choice. So you can do that. If you do not know how to do that, that's okay. Just drop somebody a note or ask your CSM or ask Google. Somebody will guide you to how to do that in the setup menu where you can change that. Anyway, coming to the consolidation point here, you can see that when you're consolidating, you can consolidate and you can still modify what it was, because sometimes you may want to be a little bit careful with what has been said or the way it has been expressed. Because a lot of people who are completing the performance reviews are also people who may not have all of the layers of HR training. So if you want to polish it, wordsmith it, I mean, it's up to you. The judgment, that's your judgment. You know, not that's not for us to say how you should do it, but the fact that you have the power to do it, that at least is something that you're able to then to use, right? So let's go to the next slide here, and just so we can. So again, once the final scores and the interpretations, and as you can see here, your spider web will always change based on how your template looks like, right? You might have a 3-section template or a 5-section template, and that's based on that the spider will weave its own web. And once you're done with all of that, you can then choose to publish the results. And this goes to point, Amy, that you were making earlier, that you don't want to publish until you think, okay, now the team member can see what the consolidated thing is. Because remember, they're not going to see what individually what anybody said, but what you chose to publish in the consolidated review. And I think maybe let's go to the next slide. Let's go to the last poll question so we can really go to the question. Okay, so there's some dashboard. Sorry, let's go to the dashboard for a minute, just that you can see a lot of the performance review, different things happening inside their performance management, because performance management is not just performance reviews, right? You're creating goals, and you're creating OKRs, and you're creating kudos, and you're creating objective. Whatever it is that you're doing, it is important to look at it in totality. I mean, Amy, I don't want to put you on spot on how you do your organization, but just in general, speaking to the broad view of performance, that's key, right? In a way to share with whether with the executive, the EM, or whatever it is, to see what's happening in the big picture.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 points I wanted to tease out on here. Being able to report on the status is absolutely critical, and it helps you, right? If you're seeing that there's low completion rates, there's probably an issue with the process, with lack of training, et cetera. But then the actual reviews themselves and being able to easily show, how reviews are dispersed and whether it is, a bell curve or whatever you say you want to achieve. I think being able to show that really easily and at a high level is important, especially for leadership conversations, definitely.
Okay, we have 10 minutes and change for some Q&A. So let's go to the next slide. I think there's some poll questions here, or okay, well, we do want to mention that, yeah, bulk reviews, sorry, go to the next slide. That all the performance reviews, they're not the end, they're just the conversation starter. You still have to then take the next steps of what we call in ClayHR to be the actions menu. Once you publish a performance review, then you want to either assign the learning actions, or you want to feed into your compensation cycle, or you want to feed into your your promotion workflows, whatever your case is. That, of course, is it may be getting into a little bit outside of the scope of this webinar, but at the same time, we would be amiss to not acknowledge that that's really where the outcomes are going to happen, and this is the process that is going to enable those actions here. Do you find, Amy, that the learnings or the compensation or promotions are the most important next level outcomes, or do you think it's something else?
Um, I think it's a matter of perspective. If you ask employees, yes, to the extent you tie performance to compensation, that is probably what they are most focused on. For your executives and your HR leaders, like the whole reason why we do this is to improve employee performance to better drive organizational results. And certainly compensation incentives support that as well. But it is about that ultimate goal. So I really like this piece here that complete, although I very much relate to the CHRO you were talking to who said, we did it and I feel good about that. And like, but that's not uh, doing it is not enough. It's really like the beginning and not the end. And all of these things really matter as well.
I think to that CHRO, I'll also mention what she said after. She said that basically, that we have to just celebrate each win. And today, we've just finished it, and today, that's good, right? Let's just celebrate that. And tomorrow we
For
will come
sure.
back, and we will come back, because HR work is never ending. It's thankless. It is, so you have to choose to celebrate it as well. Okay, saying now is time for cake, right?
Yes. Yes.
Time for cake. Not to say the work is finished. We will come back tomorrow and do more with this data that we have now consolidated. Today we rest, right? So I think that's important as well, because otherwise you may never find that respite. Say, okay, here we finished it. So I think in that sense is good. I think we have a poll question next, and let's just go into Q&A. I just want to make sure. Okay, I'll launch the quick poll here, or maybe Okay, I'll launch that. So it should be on. Let's just, I'm gonna start reading Q&A already just to see while people, I think people have time and if you can please take the poll question 3, and I know we skipped poll question 2 in interest of time here because we started talking about other things, and that's okay. Just let's see. I'm gonna read through the quick Q&A here. Simone, you can do the same. I want to make sure. Um, Amy, this one's a difficult one. I'm gonna throw it your way. Do you recommend segmenting the workforce by location, by org unit, or by job profile? Ooh, when doing the bulk reviews here.
I
I'll
think that that is a great question, and I think the answer very much depends on uh, your organizational culture and how different, like where does the natural differentiation fall? So I would look at, if you have differentiations in your benefits or other things that you could point to tie it to. But the good news is when you have a technology solution in place, you can get as creative as you want to, and it's very easy to scale.
got it. Um, So that was Michael's question, and I did. Okay, so there you go. That one. Kevin is asking. Sometimes it's difficult for us to confirm the calculations because of multiple scales used inside. What do you recommend? I mean, I don't know. Amy is gonna recommend
Yeah.
something else. I'll just recommend that don't do a crazy mixture of 17 different assessments. Use two if you have to. But try to stick with one or go to two. But I don't know, Amy, you might have another answer.
No, I think that's right. And I'll offer an answer as well to the question right above it about dynamic and static sections. In a large organization, I think you need to have, as we talked about, something that's consistent to be able to calibrate. And you need to have ideally whatever qualities you decide to make consistent between reviews, have the scale that you're rating be consistent as well, because otherwise you're not going to be able to compare apples to apples, and it is going to get really complex.
Another person's asking, how can we, and Simone, in the meantime, you can be at the next slide if you like. We're not really going through any more slides. We're just taking these 8 minutes to answer questions, as many as we can here. One person's asking, how can we leverage the performance review process to actively reinforce and promote our org values? I mean, to that, my suggestion usually is simply include them. Include the org values in your performance review. Have a section just for that. Uh, and that's very easy to do inside ClayHR. And also, that will at least force people to have to say something about how they support that value or something. Would you say the same, Amy? Maybe on
I no, I totally agree. And if you organizations differ, right? If you have a lot of values, you don't have to include all of them. You could just have, one section where you say, how well does this person live the values of our organization? And so, just kind of group them all together. But if those values are really, well ingrained in the organization and you really want that to drive behavior, because I think most HR practitioners would agree that they do. I love including it in the performance review process.
Okay, we are so slowly working through this Q&A pile here. Could you elaborate on the distinction between dynamic and static sections and performance reviews? I think I can take that one. Essentially, just as you saw, maybe we discussed this a little bit. Our dynamic section in a performance review is where you just declare it that this will be a section, but you don't specify what's in it. Rather, it will dynamically be pulled from the person to who it's assigned to. For example, you can say this section will contain your approved goals. You're just defining that at the template level. Then when you assign me that performance review, it'll include my goals. And when you use the same performance review template for Amy, it will include Amy's goals. So those sections are called dynamic sections because in the template level, you don't define what's in it, but you just declare it and it'll automatically pull in the corresponding section. Similarly, the skills sections, training sections are dynamic sections versus the even the org value section is a dynamic section, even though it's not personalized dynamic, comes from the organization. But you could also have static sections which just says, okay, for salespeople, we're going to ask them these three questions. And that's true irrespective of which person you get assigned to. So that's a distinction on that one. How would you, I'm going to the next one. How much weight should goals carry in performance review assessment? I don't know, but I will tell you this, that by default, when people ask me this, I often say, you have four things here. You have a static section, you have goals, you have skills, you have org values. You also have trainings, but trainings don't carry weight themselves, right? You were just going to say, hey, which training should I take, etc. So I exclude them from this conversation. I say you have goals, you have skills, you have static section, you have org values. My suggestion on this one, which could be different from what Amy says, is that start with 25, 25, 25, four different ways, right? Then you see, hey, in our organization, this is more important than that. Okay, well, give five from this to that, right? And after a couple of those iterations, you'll come to what makes sense for you. You might come to 30, 30, 20, 20, or something along those lines. But Amy, let me defer to you as well.
Um, I think it depends again a little bit on the organization. But Amrinder, the way that you proposed it, I think would be fine if there's not a current rubric in place. If an organization has strategic goals, I think that's an argument to weight it more heavily. If you lack that, I think it can be a little bit harder and end up feeling kind of disjointed for employees. But I want to just refer back to what I said earlier in the presentation. Even if you have organizational goals, be mindful that for some positions, it can be a little bit harder to tie in the nature of what they do to those goals. So be flexible and, utilize different templates if it makes sense.
Well, the Q&A pile is getting longer. It reminds me of sometimes when I'm driving in the DC traffic, that you say it's 40 minutes away. After driving 10 minutes, then you say 50 minutes away. You're like, no, it's supposed to get shorter, not longer. What are you doing? So, okay, so let's try to take one or two more questions here. Okay, Felix's question, what causes some goal sliders to become deactivated within the same period in ClayHR? That's a setting that in the template, you chose that the goals are brought in as frozen. That means you cannot dynamically choose them here in the performance review. You have to do that in the goals. That means performance reviews are observing the goal, they're not influencing the goal. That's a setting. So if you need help, please just drop in the 24/7 chat on the website or on your platform, and somebody can explain this thing. But that's basically what that answer is. So I think that's an easy one. I'll mark that one as done. This is a difficult one, Amy. This one's for you. How should organizations approach decisions about salary increases once performance reviews are finalized? Yeah.
First of all, don't wait until they're finalized to set the process in place. You got to define your budget, and then whatever your rating scale is, an easy way to approach it. I'd recommend that you define, for a rating of this, you could get an increase between this and this, and it gives managers parameters. So number one, they still feel like they have control because they should, but also sets you up to stay within budget and be fair and consistent. And I'm going to tie that to the next question. Should promotions be based on performance reviews only? Not necessarily, but you need to be consistent and objective. And having a documented performance review process really supports that well. If you're not using performance reviews currently to make those promotion decisions, think about how they naturally are occurring and how you can tie that into the performance review process. And if they're naturally occurring in a way that's all over the board, it's not necessarily a performance review process. It's more about manager training and trying to drive the organizational consistency. But that's a really good question.
Okay, so we're gonna take one last question here. I know we're coming up to very much in time, like how to send reminders when people don't complete. Essentially, when you see the bulk, I mean, the simple answer to that question is that when you go to the bulk actions tab in ClayHR, one of the bulk actions is send reminder. You choose that. You choose all the pending performance reviews that you want to send reminders to, and therefore you have. I mean, there are many questions that we couldn't get to, but we do want to finish on time here. Simon, can you do me a favor and just go to slide 32? Just escape that and go to 32 maybe. Sorry, just maybe just escape that and go to 32. Sometimes doesn't, yeah, just go to 32 here. And that way, just we don't have time to get through all the questions, but please connect with Amy, connect with myself on LinkedIn. We'll try to get your questions answered, or of course, yeah, there we go. And then just connect with either of us. We'll try to get it. Of course, you have your CSM. Just drop in a line at the ClayHR website. Use the 24/7 live chat. Somebody will answer your question. We couldn't get to all the questions here. Fiona, you had mentioned the high functioning culture is a norm. I believe I think that's a good comment. That's absolutely true. So I think with that, we will try to wrap up the webinar today. The time has gone by very quickly, but thank you for everyone for your attention. Again, Amy, thank you for all your insights. I mean, that's why I enjoy working with dynamic leaders such as yourself. This is exactly what makes it so worthwhile.
Thank you. This has been great and wonderful questions. And I'm so pleased to see all the fantastic conversations. So I really enjoyed the past hour.
Thank you, Simone, for leading it as always. And again, please just connect with us and we'll try to get your questions answered offline.